welcome to another County Chronicle podcast. Today we'll be trying something a little different. I had an opinion piece that I was going to publish for the school newspaper about Tom Brady. I was told that it was a little bit too long and we should try it in podcast form. So today we're going to be covering Tom Brady because it's a little bit of a hot topic. He just won the Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, beating the Chiefs 31-9. But I want to get Scott and Matt and Jackson to weigh in on their opinions.
So, me being a Dolphins fan, it's very hard for me to say that Tom Brady's the GOAT. But looking at his stats comparable to everyone else, it's not even a conversation. He is so much, his stats are so much better than everyone else's. I like to think that Aaron Rodgers is up there in that conversation, but looking at the stats, Aaron Rodgers is nowhere near him. Yeah. Aaron Rodgers has, 6 less Super Bowls, but 20,000 less yards, a couple hundred less touchdowns. It's not even comparable, which is frustrating because Tom Brady's beat my Dolphins so many times, but it's just not comparable.
Which is funny that you mentioned the Dolphins because they also seem to be Brady's kryptonite in December. The Miami Miracle, Ryan Fitzpatrick bumped them out of the 2 seed and made them play the Titans, which obviously ended Brady's time in New England in the wild card round. But Jackson, do you have any thoughts before we dive in a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely the GOAT of the sport. And I was a Peyton Manning guy before then, but pretty much even after Peyton Manning won his last ring, it was pretty much undisputed. I mean, again, like Scott said, his stats are better than anybody else's in the history of the game. And he is the undisputed best winner and best leader that this sport has ever seen, and possibly of any sport. And just his ability to just come out against the best of the quarterbacks, that's just astonishing to me.
Yeah, so you mentioned the best of the quarterbacks, and I have a lot of stats here. He's 3-1 versus Rodgers. He's beaten Breeze in the playoffs, obviously, this year. He's 3-2 versus Mahomes, who many people think is going to be the next all-time great. He's beaten Mahomes 2 times in the playoffs, once in the AFC Championship, once in the Super Bowl. Manning kind of gave him trouble in the playoffs, but he's 11-6 all-time versus Manning. Just a lot of winning against some great quarterbacks. Matt, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I think also if you just look at the legacy left behind in New England, not even looking at stats, it's kind of hard to argue that he isn't the GOAT just based on the impact he left on that team, all the wins, all the the playoff wins. It's just looking at stats, it's very hard to argue. He's undisputed GOAT now, especially after the 7th title. I just think you can't really make an argument anymore.
Yeah, so that's interesting because I played devil's advocate in one of my paragraphs. I talked about a lot of people's arguments. Brady was investigated for Deflategate. He was on the Patriots during Spygate. The whole Tuck rule thing, people kind of argue hurts his legacy. I don't really get these arguments. I think they're kind of weak, but if anybody wants to talk about them.
I just think those played a part. At current time, those hurt his legacy. But then everyone was saying the debate of Belichick and Brady, who was really, the mastermind behind all those wins, and him leaving and then doing the same thing he did in New England at Tampa, a team who was, I think they were 7-9 last year, with basically no training camp with the team, and he took them to a Super Bowl, beat Patrick Mahomes, as you said. It's safe to say that Brady was the main contributor in New England's success.
Yeah.
One of the things I think is overlooked is his longevity. I mean, he's played, over 20 years, and he's only missed 19 games. Not one season into his ACL and before he's been suspended. That's insane that you can play that long without having any, more than one really severe injuries. And he came back from the ACL next year, and I believe did they go to the Super Bowl that year?
They came back. No, they didn't go to the Super Bowl that year. They didn't go again until 2011. Yeah, they made the playoffs. I think they lost in the AFC Championship.
Yeah, even like that's insane.
Yeah.
Another thing to look at is like you look at the quarterbacks coming in the league now, and they're like, basically promised a starting spot. Brady didn't come into the league that way. He was highly underrated, and he only got a start because of an injury. So, to have an underrated, beginning to an excellent career like that is also something to, notify about.
Yeah. I think that the big thing is that he started out as the quarterback kind of nobody wanted. I feel like that's kind of the thing a lot of people say about him. He was drafted, 6th round, and out of Michigan, not looked at as a very prototypical quarterback, not very mobile with his feet, which was important back then, but has only become more important as time has gone on, and he's still been able to compete at a very high level with the best of the mobile quarterbacks. And I think that just his ability to compete against more athletically gifted quarterbacks. Again, everybody looks at Rodgers and Mahomes, and he beat Rodgers and Mahomes this past playoffs, both games. And Mahomes, really the only games that he's ever lost is his 2 times he's lost to Brady in the playoffs. And I've always said don't bet against Mahomes. But Brady's the only one that has been able to do it against him.
I want to give a shout out to my boy Alex West. He was telling me after the Super Bowl how he still thinks Peyton Manning is better and how Peyton Manning's a more clutch quarterback. And I just kind of went through that. And I really don't believe Peyton Manning's... he's a great quarterback and he's top 10 all time, maybe even top 5. But I don't think you can argue that he's even anywhere close to as clutch as Brady. Against the Seahawks, he lost 43-8 in a Super Bowl with a 75 rating and 2 picks. Against the Panthers, he got the win, but he threw for 142, 1 pick. Really didn't look like himself at all. He threw that game-sealing interception against the Saints. Yeah, and I just don't know how you could argue that Peyton Manning's even anywhere near Brady in terms of clutchness.
And another thing that, just kind of solidifies, Tom Brady's GOAT conversation is the influence he has on teams. Like, you look at wide receivers that the Patriots have drafted, like Julian Edelman, Chris Hogan, who really, again, were, not wanted. They weren't, high recruited. They, going into the league, were not valued as much as they should.
Yeah.
And Brady helped them, turn into amazing wide receivers. Especially. And then going to Tampa, no one really wanted to go there. You get Brady to go there, you get Gronk to come back, Antonio Brown, you get Leonard Fournette on there, along with their defense. It just all played well this year.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you bring up the wide receivers. He turned Danny Amendola into a household name. Danny Amendola was a talented wide receiver before Brady, but he was never...
That 1 year.
Yeah, he was never Danny playoff Amendola before Brady. And that Julian Edelman was a quarterback at some no-name school, Kent State. He was an undersized quarterback. Chris Hogan just signed
he's going to the PLL to play a professional lacrosse.
Yeah, he turned a lacrosse dude into a legitimate deep threat, which is pretty insane. So, yeah, I just don't see any arguments for Tom Brady, and I broke it all down in this essay. And hopefully, at some point, I can publish this somewhere.
But to that argument, if you look at all the great quarterbacks, they make those average receivers into good receivers. I'm not gonna say Tony Romo's in the top 10 all time. He's very underrated compared to everyone else. All those receivers he had to deal with besides Des Bryant, Miles Austin.
That's true. That's right.
So I don't want to say only Tom Brady turns all the good quarterbacks make their receivers decent. Look at Rodgers, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Who's that? Before, if you didn't have Rodgers, he'd probably be out of the league.
Remember, what's his name? Jeff Janis?
Yeah.
Hail Mary pass from Aaron Rodgers against the Cardinals. Who's Jeff Janis? Yeah, and I just kind of went through all his clutch moments, and I'd like to take a moment to touch on them. Obviously, the biggest one being the 28-3 against the Falcons, and you can argue the Falcons kind of fell off during that game, which I'm not going to deny. The Falcons fell off. He came back from 10 down multiple times to the Jaguars in the AFC Championship. Miles Jack. Yeah. Of course, even in losses, he's been very great in Super Bowls. 500 yards versus the Eagles. Took the lead on a pass to Gronk. Pass to Gronk in Super Bowl 53 to set up the game winner. Multiple drives against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship, including multiple third down and longs in that overtime. It's just too many to count.
I also think what puts him above the rest is, yes, Rodgers is a great quarterback, but if you look at Brady's winning percentage and numbers in the playoffs, it's night and day to the quarterbacks that a lot of people say are in that conversation. I mean, just on playoffs alone, Brady could easily have a good conversation just on that. So I think when you look at it, yes, Rodgers is a great quarterback, but he really hasn't shown much, except for in 2010 when they won the Super Bowl. He really hasn't shown much if they get to the playoffs, if he can perform well.
Yeah, I was just looking at some of these stats. He has 83 playoff touchdowns, which is 2 times better than Breeze. It's better than Manning, Favre, Rodgers, Montana. So yeah, any closing thoughts from you, Jackson?
I mean, yeah, I think he's the undisputed GOAT of at least his sport. I don't think you can dispute that at all. I think I think the thing that seals it for me is his head-to-head versus some of the best quarterbacks in the league that we've seen. And I think that is the biggest indicator. You can have all the regular season accolades that you want, but if you can't do it in the playoffs against the best, it kind of means nothing, and he's consistently done it against the best in the playoffs. So.
Yeah, and you look at this run this year, he went through Breeze, Rodgers, Mahomes in consecutive weeks. So
yeah, don't forget Taylor Heineke.
Taylor Heineke. That's an interesting conversation too, which I think I'll dive into with Scott when we finally start our football podcast.
Yeah, that's another, a big thing. You look at just the main quarterbacks that he's faced this playoff, and they're all arguably in the top 10. People can make an argument for all three, and he, not with ease, but he took them down all on the road. Didn't have a home game against a single one of them. He went into the Superdome, beat Breeze, went into Lambeau, beat Rodgers, and then eventually beat Mahomes in the Super Bowl. But it wasn't an easy run for them.
Yeah, and that's another thing. He's the first quarterback ever to play a home game in a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Of course it would be Tom Brady.
And the haters are going to say, well, home field advantage and all that, but if you look at it before, he didn't really need it.
Yeah, so my closing thoughts, again, he's the greatest of all time. You can argue he's the greatest of other sports, when you compare him to football. He's the most dedicated winner, so he's just the greatest quarterback we've ever seen.